Hello everyone. Today we will discuss Chapter 23, Formation of New States and Rural Expansion in the Peninsula. The new phase, the period circa AD 300 to 750 marks the second historical phase in the regions south of the Vindhyas. It contained some of the processes which had started in the first historical phase, circa 200 BC to AD 300. It also introduced certain new phenomena which are not found on any scale in earlier times. In the first phase, we notice the ascendancy of the Shadavahanas over the Deccan and that of the Tamil kingdoms in the southern districts of Tamil Nadu. In that period, the northern portion of Tamil Nadu, southern Karnataka, a portion of southern Maharashtra, and land between Godavari and Mahanadi broadly owed allegiance to seats of political authority established outside their state. They themselves did not have their own states. Now, in these areas and also in Vidarbha between AD 300 and 360, AD 360, 600, there arose about 2 dozen states which are known to us from their land charters. Eventually, by the beginning of the 7th century, the Pallavas of Kanji, the Chalukyas of Badami, and the Pandyas of Madurai emerged to be the three major states, which are the Pallavas of Kanchi, Chalukyas of Badami, and Pandyas of Madurai. The first historical phase is marked by the appearance of numerous crafts, internal and external trade, widespread use of coins, and a good number of towns. Trade towns and coinage system seem to be in a state of decline in the second phase, which is distinguished by a large number of land grants made to the Brahmanas free of taxes. The grants suggest that many new areas were brought under the cultivation and settlement. This period therefore saw far more expansion of agrarian economy. We also notice the march of triumphant Brahmanism. In the first phase, we encounter extensive Buddhist monuments in both Andhra and Maharashtra. Cave inscriptions probably indicate the existence of Jainism and also of Buddhism in the southern districts of Tamil Nadu. But now Jainism was confined to Karnataka, and in the peninsula as a whole, we find numerous instances of the performance of Vedic sacrifices by kings. This phase also marked the beginning of the construction of stone temples for Shiva and Vishnu in Tamil Nadu under the Pallavas and in Karnataka under the Chalukyas of Badami. By the beginnings of the second phase, South India had ceased to be land of megaliths, and towards its end, we notice the process of which eventually made it a land of temples. The language followed by the rulers and the literate class underwent a change. Even if we leave aside the Ashokan inscription found in Andhra and Karnataka, epigraphs between the 2nd century BC and the 3rd century AD were mostly written in Prakrit. The Brahmi inscriptions, which are found in Tamil Nadu, also contain Prakrit words. But from about AD 400, Sanskrit became the official language in the peninsula, and most charters were composed in it. Okay. The Deccan and South India, circa AD 300 to AD 750. Deccan and South India. Okay. Madurai, Urayur, Kaviripattanam, Madras, Mahabalipuram, Kanchi, Dharanikota, Vengi, Nagarjunakonda, Gundur, Badami, Aihul, Pattadakal, Banavasi, Bombay, Ellora, Ajanta, Nagpur. Okay. States of the Deccan and South India. In northern Maharashtra and Vidarbha, Bera, Shadavahanas were succeeded by the Vakadagas, a local power Okay, the Vakadagas, who were Brahmins themselves, are known from a large number of copper plate land grants issued to the Brahmanas. They were great champions of the Brahminical religion and performed numerous Vedic sacrifices. Their political history is of more importance to North India than to South India. We have seen Chandragupta II married his daughter Prabhavati Gupta in the Vakadaga royal family and with its support succeeded in conquering Gujarat and adjoining parts of the western India from the Shagas in the last quarter of the 4th century AD. But culturally, the Vakadaga kingdom became a channel of transmitting Brahmanical ideas and social institutions to the south. The Vagadaga power was followed by that of Chalukyas of Badami. So first Shadavanas, then Vagadagas, then Chalukya. SVC. Okay. SVC. Vagadaga's power was followed by that of the Chalukyas of Badami, who played an important role in the history of Deccan and South India for about 2 centuries till AD 757, when they were overthrown by their feudatories, the Rashtrakutas. The Chalukyas claimed their descent either from Brahman or Manu or Mon. They boast that their ancestors ruled at Ayodhya, but all this was done to claim legitimacy and respectability. Really, they seem to have been local Canaries people who were improvised in the ruling Varna under Brahmanical influence. Okay. Figure 23.1 shows cave temple at Badami. Okay. The Chalukyas set up their kingdom towards the beginning of the 6th century AD in the western Deccan. They established their capital at Vatapi, modern Badami, in the district of Bijapur, which forms a part of Karnataka. Later they branched off into several independent ruling houses. But the main branch continued to rule at Vatapi for 2 centuries. In this period, no other power in the Deccan was so important as the Chalukyas of Badami until we come to Vijayanagar in the late medieval times. On the ruins of Shadavana power in the eastern part of the peninsula, there arose the Ikshavugus in the Krishna Gundur region. They seem to have been a local tribe who adopted the exalted name of Ikshavugus in order to demonstrate the antiquity of their lineage. They have left behind many monuments at Nagarjunakonda and Dharani Kota. They started the practice of land grants in the Krishna Gundur region, where several of their copper plate charters have been discovered. Amma, the Ikshavugus were supplanted by the Pallavas. The term Pallava means creeper and is a Sanskrit version of the Tamil word Tondai, which also carries the same meaning. The Pallavas were possibly a local tribe who established their authority in the Tondai Nadu or the land of creepers. But it took them some time to be completely civilized because in Tamil the word Pallava is also synonym of robber. The authority of the Pallavas extended over both southern Andhra and northern Tamil Nadu. They set up their capital at Kanchi, identical with the modern Kanchipuram, which became a town of temples and Vedic learning under them. The early Pallavas came into conflict with Kadambas. So Kadambas were contemporaries of Pallavas, who had founded their rule in northern Karnataka in the 4th century AD. They claimed to be Brahmanas and they rewarded their fellow caste men generously. The Kadamba kingdom was founded by Mayura Sharman. The Kadamba kingdom was founded by Mayura Sharman. It is said that he came to receive education at Kanji, but he was driven out unceremoniously. Smarting under this insult, the Kadamba chief set up his camp in a forest and defeated the Pallavas, possibly with the help of the forest tribes. Eventually, the Pallavas avenged the defeat but recognized the Kadamba authority by formally investing Mayura Sharman with the royal insignia. Mayur Sharman is said to have performed 18 Ashwamedas or horse sacrifices and granted numerous villages to the Brahmanas. The Kadambas established their capital at Vaijayanti or Banavasi in North Kannada district in Karnataka. The Ganges were another important contemporary of Pallavas. Okay, so Kadambas were contemporary of Pallavas, then the Ganges. Okay, the Ganges were also contemporary of Pallavas. They set up their rule in southern Karnataka around the 4th century. Their kingdom lay between that of the Pallavas in the east and of the Kadambas in the west. They are called Western Ganges or Gangas of Mysore in order to demarcate them from the Eastern Gangas who ruled in Kalinga from the 5th century. For most of the time, the Western Gangas were the feudatories of Pallavas. Their capital, the earliest capital, is located at Kolar, which may have helped the rise of this dynasty because of its gold mines. Western Gangas made land grants mostly to the Jainas. The Kadambas also made grants to the Jainas, but they favored the Brahmanas more. But the Pallavas granted numerous villages of taxes, largely to the Brahmanas. The Pallavas granted numerous villages free of taxes, largely to the Brahmanas. We have as many as 16 land charters of the early Pallavas. A few which seems to be earlier are written on stone in Prakrit, but most of them were recorded on copper plates in Sanskrit. The villages granted to the Brahmanas were exempted from payment of all taxes and forced labor to the state. This implied that these were collected from the peasantry by the Brahmanas for their own enjoyment. As many as 18 kinds of immunities were granted to the Brahmanas in a Pallava grant of the 4th century. They were empowered to enjoy the granted land free from payment of land tax, from supply of forced labor, from supply of provisions to royal officers in town, and free from the interference of royal constabulary and agents. The Pallavas, Kadambas, Chalukyas of Badami and their other contemporaries were great champions of Vedic sacrifices. They performed Ashwamedha and Vajpaya sacrifices, which not only legitimized their position and enhanced their prestige, but also added enormously to the income of the priestly class. The Brahmanas therefore emerged as an important class at the expense of peasantry, from whom they collected their dues directly and also received as gifts a portion of the taxes collected by the king from his subjects. The situation seems to have proved oppressive, and eventually it caused a revolt led by the Calabras in the 6th century. The revolt affected the Pallavas as well as their neighboring contemporaries. The Calabras are called the evil rulers who overthrew innumerable kings and established their hold in the Tamil land. They put an end to the Brahmadeya rights granted to the Brahmanas in numerous villages. It seems that Kalabras held Buddhist persuasions, for they patronized Buddhist monasteries. It is significant that Kalabras revolt could be put down only through the joint efforts of Pandyas, Pallavas, and Chalukyas of Badami. There is also a tradition of Kalabras had imprisoned the Chola, Pandya, and Chera kings. All this shows that their revolt had assumed wide proportions and produced repercussions outside the Tamil land. The confederacy of the king against the Kalabras, who had revoked the land grants made to the Brahmanas, shows that the revolt was directed against the existing social and political order in South India. Conflict between the Pallavas and Chalukyas. The main interest in the political history of Peninsular India from the 6th to the 8th centuries centers around the long struggle between the Pallavas of Kanchi and the Chalukyas of Badami for supremacy. The Pandyas, who were in control of Madurai and Tinneveli districts of Tamil Nadu, joined this conflict as a poor third. Although both the Pallavas and Chalukyas championed Brahmanism, performed Vedic sacrifices, and made grants to the Brahmanas, the two quarreled with each other for the plunder, prestige, and territorial resources. Both tried to establish supremacy over the land lying between the Krishna and Tungabhadra. This job formed the bone of contention in late medieval times between the Vijayanagar and Brahmani kingdoms. Time and again, Pallava princes tried to cross the Tungabhadra, which formed the natural historic boundary between many a kingdom of the Deccan and the deep south. This struggle continued for long with varying fortunes. The first important events in this long conflict took place in the reign of Pulakeshin II, the most famous Chalukya king, 609 to 642. He is known to us from his eulogy written by the court poet Ravi Kirti in the Aihole inscription, Pulakeshin II. Okay, this inscription is an example of poetic excellence reached in Sanskrit, and in spite of its exaggeration, is a valuable source for the biography of Pulakeshin. He overthrew the Kadamba capital at Banavasi and compelled the Gangas of Mysore to acknowledge his suzerainty. He also defeated Harsha's army on the Narmada and checked his advance towards the Deccan. In his conflict with the Pallavas, he almost reached the Pallava capital, but the Pallavas purchased peace by ceding their northern provinces to the Pulakeshin II. About AD 610, Pulakeshin II wrested from the Pallavas the region between the Krishna and Godavari, which came to be known as the province of Vengi. Here was set up a branch of the main dynasty, and it is known as Eastern Chalukyas of Vengi. However, Pulakeshin's second invasion of the Pallava territory ended in failure. The Pallava king Narasimhavarman, AD 630 to 668, occupied the Chalukya capital at Vadapi in about AD 642, when Pulakeshin II was probably killed in fight against the Pallavas. Narasimhavarman assumed the title of Vadapi Konda, or the conqueror of Vadapi. So who assumed the title of Vadapi Konda, or the conqueror of Vadapi? It is Narasimhavarman. Okay, he is also said to have defeated the Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, and the Calabras. Towards the end of the 7th century, there was a lull in this conflict, which was again resumed in the first half of the 8th century AD. The Chalukya king Vikramaditya II, AD 733 to 745, is said to have overrun Kanchi 3 times. In 740, he completely defeated the Pallavas. His victory ended the Pallava supremacy in far south, although the ruling house continued for more than a century afterwards. However, the Chalukyas could not enjoy the fruits of their victory over the Pallavas for long, for their own hegemony was brought to an end by the Rashtrakutas. Okay. In 757. Okay. Temples. Besides the performance of Vedic sacrifices, the worship of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, especially of the last two, was getting popular. From the 7th century, the saints, the Alvar saints who were great devotees of Vishnu, Alvar Vishnu, Evi. Okay, popularized the worship of this god. The Nayanars rendered a similar service to the cult of Shiva. NS. Nayanas Shiva. Okay, Nayanar. നമ്മുടെ മുഖ്യമന്ത്രി നായനാർ ഒരു ശിവഭക്തനായിരുന്നു. Okay, the Pallava kings constructed a number of stone temples in the 7th and 8th centuries for housing these gods. The most famous of them are 7 Ratha temples found at Mahabalipuram at a distance of 65 kilometers from Madras. These were built in the 7th century by Narasimhavarman, who founded the port city of Mahabalipuram or Mamallapuram. This city is also famous for the shore temple, which was structural construction. Okay, figure 23.2 shows the Ratha temples at Mahabalipuram. Figure 23.3 shows the Kailasanath temple at Kanchi. Okay. In addition to this, the Pallavas constructed several structural temples at their capital Kanji. A very good example was the Kailasnath temple built in the 8th century. The Chalukyas of Badami erected numerous temples at Aihole from about 610 AD. Aihole contains as many as 70 temples. The work was continued in the adjacent towns of Badami and Pattadakal. Pattadakal has 10 temples built in the 7th and 8th centuries. The most celebrated of these are the Pabanatha temple, circa 680, and the Virupaksha temple, circa 740. The first, although 30 meters long, which is Pabanatha temple, has a low and stunted tower in the northern style. The second was constructed purely in the southern style. Okay. It is about 40 meters in length and has a very high square and storied tower, Shikara. The temple walls are adorned with beautiful sculptures representing scenes from the Ramayana. We have no clear idea how these early temples were maintained. After the 8th century, land grants to temples became a common phenomenon in South India, and usually they were recorded on the walls of the temples. But earlier, the temples seem to have been constructed and maintained out of the taxes collected by the king from the common people. Some temples in Karnataka under the Chalukyas were erected by the Jaina traders. Although the common people worshipped their village gods by offering them paddy and toddy, they may also have made offerings to these temples to acquire status and to satisfy their religious cravings. Demands on the peasantry. There is no doubt that for carrying on wars, for cultivating art and literature, for promoting religion, and for maintaining the administrative staff, enormous resources were needed. These were apparently provided by the peasantry. Okay, the nature of burdens imposed on the agrarian communities is more or less the same in the Vakadaga kingdom and the Pallava kingdom, although the former belonged to the Vidarbha and Maharashtra, and the later to the southern Andhra and northern Tamil Nadu. In addition to the land tax, which was part of the produce, the king could demand benevolence in the form of cereals and gold, and could bore certain trees such as palm mitra for obtaining salt and moist substances such as sugar and liquor, all derived from plants. Of course, all the deposits and hidden treasures in the villages belonged to him. Further, he demanded flowers and milk, wood and grass, and could compel the villagers to carry loads free of charge. The king was also entitled to forced labor or vishti in connection with the visit of royal officials who would appear in the villages either for collecting taxes or for punishing the criminals. And also in course of the march of the army, the rural communities had to perform a number of obligations. They had to supply bullocks for carts and provide cots, charcoal, ovens, cooking pots, and attendants. The whole list of impositions would show that the state made heavy demands on the labor and produce of the peasantry. Most of these demands were covered by the 18 types of immunities granted to the Brahmanas from the 4th century AD. Later, more and more demands were made on peasantry. Rural expansion. These numerous demands made by the king on the agrarian population presupposed capacity to pay on the part of the peasantry. Collection could not have been possible unless there was increase in agricultural production. In this period, we witness formation of new states in the Trans-Vindhyan regions. Every state had a number of feudatory chiefdoms, which were small states within a large state. Each of these states, big or small, paramount or feudatory, needed its own army, its own taxation system, its own administrative machinery, and a good number of priestly and similar supporters. Every state therefore needed resources which could be obtained from its rural base. Therefore, the state could not multiply without the proliferation of rural communities or increase in agricultural production in the existing villages. It seems that in tribal areas, the Brahmanas were granted land and the tribal peasantry learned the value of preserving cattle and better methods of agriculture from them. In certain areas, there was a dearth of labor power. In order to keep the economy of such areas going, it was also found necessary to make over some sharecroppers and weavers to the Brahmins, and is known from an early Pallava grant. Therefore, the large number of grants made to the Brahmanas played an important role in spreading new methods of cultivation and increasing the size of rural communities. In this period, we come across three types of villages in South India: Ur, Sabha, and Nagaram. Ur was the usual type of village inhabited by peasant castes who perhaps held their land in common. It was responsibility of the village headman to collect and pay taxes on their behalf. These villages were mainly found in southern Tamil Nadu. The Sabha type of the village consisted of Brahmadeya villages, or those granted to the Brahmanas, and of Agrahara villages. The Brahmana the Brahmana owners enjoyed individual rights in the land but carried on their activities collectively. The Nagaram type of village consisted of the villages settled and dominated by the combinations of traders and merchants. This happened possibly because trade declined and merchants moved to the villages. In the Chalukya areas, rural affairs were managed by village elders called Mahajana. On the whole, the period circa AD 300 to AD 750 provides good evidence of rural expansion, rural organization, and better use of land. Social structure. We can present a rough picture of the social structure that developed in this period. Society was dominated by princes and priests. The princes claimed the status of Brahmanas or Kshatriyas. Through many of them were local tribal chiefs promoted to the second Varna through the benefactions made to the priests. The priests invented the respectable family trees for these chiefs and traced their descent from the age-old solar and lunar dynasties. This process enabled the new rulers to acquire legitimacy in the eyes of people. The priests were mainly Brahmanas, though the Jaina and Buddhist monks should also be placed in this category. In this phase, priests gained an influence and authority because of land grants. Below the princes and priests came the peasantry, which was divided into numerous peasant castes. Possibly most of them were called Shudras in the Brahmanical system. If the peasant and the artisan caste failed to produce and render services and payments, it was looked upon as a departure from the established dharma or norm. Such a situation was described as the age of Kali. It was the duty of the king to put an end to such state of affairs and restore peace and order, which worked in favors of chiefs and priests. The title Dharma Maharaja therefore is adopted by Vakadaga, Pallava, Kadamba, and Western Ganga kings. The real founder of the Pallava power, Simhavarman, is credited with coming to the rescue of Dharma when it was beset with the evil attributes typical of Kali Yuga. Apparently, it refers to his suppression of the Kalabras who upset the existing social order. So we have completed chapter 23. In the next video, we will discuss chapter 24, India's cultural contacts with the Asian countries. Thank you for listening me. We'll see you next class. Thank you very much.